What if the problem was never your motivation? Be honest with yourself for a second. How many times have you said, "This is it, I'm starting Monday," or "Next month I'm locking in," or maybe even "This year is my year," and for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, you felt unstoppable. You had the energy, the clarity, the fire, and then something faded, not your dream, not your desire, just the drive. And suddenly the habit slipped. The routine cracked. The promise you made to yourself quietly dissolved. Now here's the uncomfortable question. What if you were never supposed to rely on motivation in the first place? That's the core shift behind Self-Discipline Mindset by Barry Davenport. And if you stay with me, I'm going to show you the one perspective change that separates people who try from people who actually transform. Because once you see this, you can't unsee it, and it changes how you approach every goal you have. Most people believe self-discipline is about intensity, about grinding harder, about pushing through resistance with sheer force. We imagine disciplined people as wired differently, tougher, more focused, more driven. But the book dismantles that myth almost immediately. Self-discipline is not a personality trait. It's not genetic. It's not reserved for high performers. It's a trained skill. And more importantly, it's a system. Here's the truth that hits hard. Willpower is unreliable. It's a limited resource. It drops when you're stressed. It shrinks when you're tired. It disappears when life gets chaotic. If your success depends on how you feel in the moment, you've already built it on unstable ground. That's not weakness. That's biology. The brain is wired to conserve energy and seek comfort. So when you rely on willpower alone, you're fighting your own wiring every single day. Disciplined people aren't fighting themselves daily. They're designing around themselves. That's the shift. Instead of asking, "How do I push myself harder?" they ask, "How do I make this easier to follow through on?" That question alone changes everything. Because self-discipline isn't about becoming more intense. It's about becoming more intentional. Let's make it practical. Imagine you want to work out consistently. The willpower approach says, "No matter how I feel, I'll force myself to go." The disciplined mindset says, "I'll schedule it at the same time every day. I'll lay out my clothes the night before. I'll remove friction." One approach relies on emotional strength. The other relies on structural strength. And structure beats emotion every time. This is where systems come in. A system is something that works even when you don't feel like working. It's automatic, it's predictable, it reduces decision fatigue. Because here's another uncomfortable truth: most people don't fail because they lack desire. They fail because they're making too many decisions every day. Should I do this now? Should I wait? Maybe later. That constant negotiation drains mental energy. Self-discipline removes negotiation. You decide once, then you follow the structure. Another major concept from the book is delayed gratification. And this is where the real separation happens. The difference between who you are now and who you want to become usually lies in one small decision repeated daily. Choosing what you want most over what you want now. Comfort now or growth later. Ease now or progress later. Impulse now or control later. It sounds simple, but compounded over months and years, those choices define outcomes. Successful people aren't superhuman. They just consistently prioritize their future over their present mood. That's it. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy, it's steady. And here's something powerful: self-discipline isn't just behavior, it's identity. If you constantly say, "I'm bad at staying consistent," your brain accepts that as truth. Your actions align with that belief. But when you start shifting the internal narrative to, "I'm the kind of person who follows through," something subtle changes. You begin acting in alignment with that identity. Identity drives behavior more than motivation ever will. The book emphasizes becoming someone you trust, and that might be the most overlooked part of discipline. Every time you tell yourself you're going to do something and you don't, you chip away at self-trust. It may seem small, but it adds up. Over time, you stop believing your own commitments. And when you don't trust yourself, goals feel heavier. But the opposite is also true. Every small promise you keep strengthens that trust. Waking up when you said you would, finishing what you started, showing up when it would be easier not to. Those moments build internal credibility. Discipline is self-trust in action. Another key insight from self-discipline mindset is that you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. Goals are direction. Habits are execution. You can want something deeply, but if your daily behaviors don't support it, wanting isn't enough. Think about that carefully. What does your average day look like? Not your ideal day, not your best day, your average Tuesday, because that's the day that builds your future. The book makes it clear, consistency beats intensity. Small, repeatable actions beat occasional bursts of effort. And here, where many people sabotage themselves, perfectionism. They miss one day and think the streak is broken. They slip once and assume they failed. But discipline isn't about never slipping. It's about not staying down. It's about responding to mistakes with adjustment instead of abandonment. A disciplined mindset says, I missed today, I'm back tomorrow. No drama, no self-attack, just correction. That's emotional maturity, and it's a huge part of self-discipline. Now let's talk about environment, because environment silently shapes behavior more than we realize. If your phone is always within reach, you'll reach for it. If junk food is in the kitchen, it'll get eaten. If your workspace is chaotic, your focus will be too. Discipline becomes easier when your environment supports it. You don't need stronger willpower. You need fewer temptations. Remove friction from good habits. Add friction to bad ones. That's strategy. That's intelligent discipline. Here's another bold truth. Motivation is entertainment. Discipline is infrastructure. Motivation feels good. It's exciting. It gives you a rush. But infrastructure is what keeps the lights on. It's what makes progress inevitable instead of occasional. And the disciplined mindset understands that the goal isn't to feel motivated. The goal is to feel consistent. So let's close the loop. At the beginning, I asked you, what if the problem was never your motivation? What if you've been trying to win a long-term game with short-term emotion? What if the real shift is this? Stop trying to become more fired up and start becoming more structured. Because once you stop depending on how you feel and start depending on how you've designed your life, everything changes. You stop restarting every Monday. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop waiting for the right time. And you start building something stable. Self-discipline isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the decision no one sees. It's the habit repeated when nobody's clapping. It's the system that runs whether you're inspired or not. And the best part, it's trainable. Not overnight, not instantly, but deliberately, through identity shifts, through environment design, through small promises kept daily, through choosing what you want most over what you want now. So the next time you catch yourself waiting for motivation, pause and ask yourself a better question. What system can I build so I don't have to rely on motivation again? That question, lived out consistently, is the self-discipline mindset. And once you adopt it, you don't just chase goals. You build the kind of structure that makes achieving them almost unavoidable. You build a life where progress isn't based on mood, weather, stress levels, or outside validation. You build a structure that carries you on the days you don't feel strong. And that's when something powerful happens. Discipline stops feeling like force and starts feeling like freedom. That sounds backwards, doesn't it? Most people hear the word discipline and think restriction. They think rigid schedules, saying no to everything fun, constantly denying yourself. But real discipline doesn't shrink your life. It expands it. Because when you're disciplined, you're not controlled by impulse. You're not pulled around by distraction. You're not constantly restarting. You're in control. And control creates confidence. Think about the areas of your life where you already feel confident. It's probably not random. It's probably in areas where you've shown up repeatedly, where you've built competence, where you've proven to yourself that you can follow through. That's not talent, that's accumulated discipline. The book makes it clear that self-discipline builds momentum, and momentum is addictive in the best way. When you keep promises to yourself, you start expecting more from yourself. Your standards rise. Not because someone pressured you, not because you watched one inspiring video, but because your identity shifts. You stop seeing discipline as something you have to do. You start seeing it as who you are. And once identity changes, behavior follows naturally. Here, where it gets even deeper, self-discipline reduces anxiety. That might sound surprising, but think about it. A lot of stress doesn't come from doing hard things. It comes from avoiding them. It comes from unfinished tasks, postponed decisions, and broken commitments. When you act decisively and consistently, that mental clutter decreases. You don't carry around the weight of "I should be doing more." You know you're doing what you said you would. That inner alignment creates calm, and calm creates clarity. Another major principle in self-discipline mindset is understanding triggers. Every habit has a cue, a moment, a pattern. If you want to change behavior, you have to identify what starts it. Most people try to attack the habit directly, but disciplined thinking asks, what's causing this behavior in the first place? Maybe it's boredom, maybe it's stress, maybe it's fatigue. When you identify triggers, you gain leverage, because you're no longer fighting blindly, you're adjusting intelligently. And this is important. Self-discipline is proactive, not reactive. Reactive living means you respond to whatever shows up. A notification pops up, you check it. A craving hits, you follow it. A mood shifts, your productivity shifts with it. Proactive living means you decide in advance who you're going to be today. You set boundaries before temptation shows up. You set routines before chaos arrives. You plan actions before emotions interfere. That's power. The book also emphasizes the importance of clarity. Discipline without clarity feels exhausting. But when you know exactly why you're doing something, resistance weakens. When your goals are vague, your effort becomes inconsistent. But when your goals are specific and meaningful, they anchor you. It's easier to delay gratification when you can clearly see what you're delaying it for. That's why disciplined people don't just set goals. They define reasons. Strong reasons create resilience. Weak reasons collapse under pressure. And let's address something honestly. Discipline can feel uncomfortable. It requires saying no. It requires choosing effort over ease. But discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is growth, signaling that you're stretching beyond your default settings. The disciplined mindset reframes discomfort as proof of progress. Instead of thinking, "This feels hard, maybe I'm not cut out for this," you think, "This feels hard because I'm building capacity." That mental shift alone prevents countless people from quitting too early. And here's something that separates long-term disciplined individuals from short-term bursts of effort: patience. Results don't always show up immediately. You can build habits for weeks before you see visible change. That's where most people fall off. They want evidence before consistency, but discipline requires consistency before evidence. You show up first, the results follow later. That's faith in process. Now let's revisit something important: small wins. The book stresses starting manageable, not extreme, not overwhelming, just sustainable. Because when you start too big, you create friction, and friction kills follow-through. But when you start small and repeat it daily, it becomes automatic. And automatic is the goal. When behaviors become automatic, they stop draining mental energy. They become part of your identity. You don't debate brushing your teeth. You just do it. That's the level discipline aims for in other areas of life. Imagine reaching that point with your health, with your work, with your personal growth. No drama, no daily battle, just consistency. And here's the final shift that ties everything together. Self-discipline is an act of self-respect. When you follow through on commitments, you're signaling to yourself that your goals matter, that your future matters, that you matter. Lack of discipline isn't laziness. It's often misalignment. It's often lack of structure. It's often unclear identity. But when you realign those elements, discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like empowerment. So if you've ever felt stuck, if you've ever felt frustrated by inconsistency, If you've ever wondered why bursts of motivation never seem to last, maybe it's not about trying harder. Maybe it's about building smarter, building systems, building identity, building environment, building self-trust. Because once those foundations are in place, progress stops being a question of if and becomes a matter of when. That's the self-discipline mindset. Not dramatic, not flashy, not dependent on hype, structured, intentional, consistent. And when you live that way long enough, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop chasing the life you want, and you start becoming the person who naturally creates it. And when you become the person who naturally creates it, you realize something that most people never fully understand. Success is not an event, it's a pattern. It's a pattern of thinking, a pattern of deciding, a pattern of showing up. The disciplined mindset isn't about one breakthrough moment where everything changes overnight. It's about stacking days that align with your standards until those standards define you. And once your standards define you, your results have no choice but to follow. What makes this powerful is that it removes drama from growth. So many people are addicted to dramatic transformation, the big announcement, the massive overhaul, the sudden reinvention. But dramatic change is rarely sustainable. The book makes it clear that sustainable change is subtle. It's quiet. It's often invisible to everyone except you. It's waking up and doing the work again. It's choosing restraint again. It's honoring your schedule again, and again, and again, until the repetition stops feeling extraordinary and starts feeling normal. And that word normal is important, because whatever you normalize becomes your baseline. If inconsistency is normal, you'll default to it. If procrastination is normal, you'll excuse it. But if preparation becomes normal, if finishing what you start becomes normal, if keeping your word becomes normal, then discipline stops being a special effort. It becomes your operating system. That's why the disciplined mindset focuses so heavily on standards instead of feelings. Feelings fluctuate, standards remain. A standard says, this is who I am regardless of mood. A standard says, I don't skip this. A standard says, this is non-negotiable. And when you create non-negotiables in your life, even just one or two, you create stability. Stability builds momentum. Momentum builds belief, and belief strengthens identity. There's also a deeper psychological layer to all of this. Every time you act in alignment with your higher standards, you reduce internal conflict. A lot of mental exhaustion doesn't come from effort itself. It comes from the constant gap between who you say you want to be and what you repeatedly do. That gap creates friction inside you. It creates doubt. It creates guilt. But when your actions and intentions align, that friction disappears. You feel lighter, more certain, more grounded. Discipline closes the gap between intention and action. And when that gap closes, confidence becomes earned instead of imagined. It's no longer positive thinking, it's evidence. You don't have to convince yourself you're capable. You've seen proof. You've built proof. That's why disciplined people carry a quiet confidence. It's not loud or performative, it's stable. It's built on repeated follow-through. Another essential idea in self-disciplined mindset is understanding that setbacks are data, not identity. When something doesn't go according to plan, the disciplined response isn't emotional collapse, it's analysis. What caused this? What can be adjusted? What needs to change in the system? This approach removes shame from the equation and replaces it with strategy. And strategy is empowering because it puts you back in control. That control also extends to time. Undisciplined living often feels rushed and reactive. You're constantly catching up, constantly responding, constantly putting out fires. But disciplined living is intentional. You decide what matters before the day begins. You allocate energy where it counts. You don't let trivial distractions consume your focus. And over time, that intentionality compounds into extraordinary results. There's also something incredibly freeing about knowing that you don't need to feel inspired to move forward. You don't need the perfect morning. You don't need the ideal circumstances. You don't need external pressure. You move because you decided to move. That autonomy creates strength. It shifts you from being dependent on conditions to being driven by commitment. And commitment is powerful because it survives discomfort. When motivation fades, commitment remains. When excitement dips, commitment holds steady. The disciplined mindset is built on commitment, not to perfection but to progress, not to intensity but to consistency, not to quick wins but to long-term growth. Over time, this way of living reshapes how you see challenges. Obstacles stop looking like threats and start looking like training. Resistance stops being a sign to quit and starts being a signal that you're building capacity. And capacity is what determines how much responsibility, success, and opportunity you can handle. Discipline increases your capacity. It expands what you're capable of managing. And here's something that ties everything together. Discipline creates options. When you're financially disciplined, you have choices. When you're physically disciplined, you have energy. When you're mentally disciplined, you have clarity. Freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want in the moment. It comes from having built the strength to choose wisely. That's the paradox. Discipline feels restrictive in the short term, but expansive in the long term. Impulse feels freeing in the short term, but limiting in the long term. The disciplined mindset simply prioritizes long-term expansion over short-term comfort. So as you think about your own life, ask yourself this: where could structure replace stress? Where could a system replace uncertainty? Where could a small daily promise rebuild your self-trust? Because you don't need to overhaul everything at once. You need to choose one area, one habit, one commitment. And protect it. Protect it until it becomes part of you. Because once discipline becomes part of you, you stop hopping for change. You start expecting growth. You stop wishing for better results. You start engineering them. And that shift from hopping to engineering is the final transformation. That's what self-discipline mindset ultimately teaches. Not just how to control impulses, not just how to build habits, but how to think differently about effort, identity, and growth. It teaches you that discipline isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's the daily practice of becoming someone stronger than your excuses. And when you internalize that, you don't just accomplish more. You evolve, you develop resilience, you develop stability, you develop an internal foundation that doesn't crumble under pressure. At that point, success isn't a surprise, it's a reflection of the systems you built, the promises you kept, the standards you protected, and the disciplined mindset you chose to live by, long after the motivation faded. And when you look back months from now, maybe even years from now, you won't remember the random bursts of motivation. You won't remember the speeches, the quotes, the hype. You'll remember the mornings you showed up when it would have been easier not to. You'll remember the quiet decisions, the disciplined responses, the moments when you chose alignment over impulse, because those are the moments that shape a life. That's the real power of the self-disciplined mindset. It doesn't promise overnight transformation. It promises something better: inevitability. When your systems are strong, when your standards are clear, when your identity supports your goals, progress becomes inevitable. Not immediate, not flashy, but inevitable. And that's a different kind of confidence. It's the kind where you don't panic when results are slow. You don't spiral when things get hard. You don't abandon the plan because the emotion faded. You trust the structure, you trust the process, and most importantly, you trust yourself. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is really about. It's not just about productivity. It's not just about achieving goals. It's about becoming someone you can rely on. Someone who doesn't need external pressure to act. Someone who doesn't need constant reminders of what they're capable of. Someone who keeps their word, especially to themselves. Imagine what changes when you become that person. Imagine the weight that lifts when you no longer question your own follow-through. Imagine how different your decisions feel when they're guided by standards instead of moods. Imagine how much energy you regain when you stop negotiating with yourself every single day. That's freedom, and it starts small. It starts with one commitment you refuse to break, one habit you protect, one system you build, one standard you raise. You don't need to transform your entire life tonight. You need to choose one area and apply the mindset. Then let consistency compound. Because discipline compounds. Every aligned decision builds strength. Every repeated action builds identity. Every kept promise builds self-trust. And self-trust builds a future that looks completely different from your past. So here's the final question, not the motivational one, not the dramatic one, but the real one. What standard are you ready to set for yourself starting today? Not when you feel inspired, not when it's convenient, not when everything lines up perfectly. Today, because the self-disciplined mindset isn't something you wait for, it's something you choose, quietly, intentionally, repeatedly. And once you make that choice and keep making it, you won't just reach your goals. You'll become the kind of person who no longer doubts that you can.